Abby Barnes was a veterinarian and hosted a radio show. She loved her job, but sometimes felt lonely. Her show was popular with pet owners who called with questions about their pets. One day, a photographer named Brian called her program. He wanted to know how to deal with his dog's fear of thunderstorms. Abby gave him some tips and their conversation went on longer than usual. Brian was mesmerized by her voice and decided to ask her out. The next day Brian sent her a gift of a box of chocolates. Abby was touched, but couldn't stop thinking about how she looked nothing like he imagined. She started lying to him on the phone, telling him that she was a tall blonde with long legs and blue eyes. In reality, Abby was a pretty brunette with brown eyes, and her looks didn't match her description at all. When Brian called again and asked her out on a date, she agreed, but got scared at the last minute and didn't go. Meanwhile, Abby had a roommate named Noelle. Noelle was a model and completely matched the description Abby had given Brian. One night Noelle came home upset after an argument with her abusive boyfriend Roy. Abby tried to calm her down and suggested they have a drink together. As they talked, they began to understand each other better and soon became real friends. However, what Abby feared most soon happened. Brian showed up at her veterinary clinic to meet her in person. Abby was confused and didn't know what to do. At that moment, Noelle walked into the clinic. Abby quickly came up with a plan and convinced Noelle to pretend to be her in front of Brian. Noelle, although unsure of the decision, agreed to help her friend. Brian was charmed by Noelle and asked her out on a date. Abby watched from her apartment window, feeling both joy and pain. She realized that cheating could have serious consequences, but she couldn't stop. Meanwhile, Noelle began to spend more and more time with Brian, and romantic feelings began to develop between them. Abby, on the other hand, continued working at her clinic and hosting her radio show, trying not to think about what was going on between her friend and Brian. Noelle and Brian started seeing each other more often, and Noelle began to feel uncomfortable with the deception. She knew she should tell Brian the truth, but every time she put it off until later. Abby also felt remorseful, but couldn't find the strength to admit to Brian who she really was. One day Noelle decided to come to Abby's radio show and hear her voice live. She was amazed at how passionate and talented Abby was when she talked about animals. It made her wonder why Abby was so afraid to be herself in front of Brian. Meanwhile, Roy, Noelle's ex-boyfriend, became aggressive and threatened her. He could not accept the fact that Noelle had left him and started stalking her. Noelle was scared and turned to Abby for help. Together they decided that they needed to report Roy's actions to the police. Abby also realized that she could no longer keep the truth from Brian. She decided to tell him everything, but she didn't know how to do it. One evening Noelle and Brian went for a walk and Roy followed them. He attacked them and a fight broke out. Noelle and Brian tried to defend themselves, but Roy was too strong. Luckily, Abby noticed what was happening and called the police. When the police arrived, Roy was arrested and Noelle and Brian were unharmed. After this incident, Noelle realized that she could no longer continue to deceive Brian. She decided to tell him the truth, that she was not Abby and that the real Abby was her friend. When Noelle told Brian the truth, he was shocked and disappointed. He felt that he had been deceived and didn't know if he could trust Noelle or Abby. However, Noelle explained to him that she only did it because she wanted to help a friend who was suffering greatly from her inferiority complex. Brian began to realize that real feelings were more important than outward appearances, so he decided to give Abby a chance. Abby was desperate when she found out that Noelle had told Brian the truth. She was afraid that he would never forgive her and that she had lost her chance at happiness. However, Brian showed up unexpectedly at her clinic and said he wanted to talk to her. They had a long talk and Abby confessed to him all her fears and insecurities. Brian listened to her carefully and understandingly, and finally said he was willing to give them both a second chance. From then on, Abby and Brian started dating and their relationship developed slowly but surely. Abby became more confident and stopped being afraid to be herself. She realized that true feelings are more important than appearance and that true love is built on mutual understanding and trust. Noelle also found her happiness. She met a good man who treated her with respect and love. Abby and Brian went for a walk with her dog. They walked down the street holding hands and laughing at some joke. Abby felt happy and grateful to have found someone in her life who accepts her for who she is. She realized that now she had everything she dreamed of: love, friendship, and a job that brought her satisfaction. Although the road to get there was difficult and full of obstacles, she knew that all the hardships were worth it in the end to get where she is now. Abby and Brian continued their journey together, confident that the future would bring them even more happiness and joy.